You're looking at the most expensive enemy in Final Fantasy XIV, the copycat Cassie. Killing it can net you over 19 million gil if you don't mind a less than 1% chance at actually getting anything, combined with hours of waiting to even attempt it. Let's talk about it, as well as a few other enemies that make up the gil machine that is Eureka. What makes them so valuable? What causes hundreds of players to show up like clockwork for such a small chance at getting a reward? And most importantly, how can you get in on the fun? I honestly wanted to talk about Cassie because it's more than just a way to make gil. It's a part of what I consider to be a really fun social experience and grind. I know that some of you just love seeing numbers going up. For those who didn't immediately notice, all of this happens in Eureka. Eureka is the exploration zone of Stormblood, which was created alongside the Stormblood relic weapon. Now, while I won't get into a full explanation of how Eureka works in this video, if you've ever done a relic weapon before, you know that they can typically be pretty involved. The cool thing about Eureka is that there are so many things that you can learn and have fun with that change the combat compared to the regular game. You get a ton of special spells and abilities that only exist within Eureka, a lot of which you would eventually see in Boja and then the variant dungeons. It's just full of a lot of different creative ways to play. The reason why Cassie is so heralded is that it drops the Cassie earring, one of two major items that give you haste, which is a stat that lowers cooldowns across the board. If you've played another Final Fantasy game, you already know how strong this can be. While it's not game-breakingly strong in Eureka, it's definitely a nice boost to have. Just keep in mind that haste from Eureka only works in Eureka and I believe Boja as well. It won't work anywhere else. The other haste item, the Blitz Ring, drops from an enemy called King Arthuro. The thing to understand is that both of these enemies are called Notorious Monsters, which are basically the fates of Eureka. Notorious Monsters are interesting because you have to kill a bunch of related enemies before the Notorious Monster can appear. For King Arthur in particular, this isn't too hard. The enemies aren't too high of a level for the zone, so it's easy for a smaller group to trigger the spawn. Cassie, on the other hand, is a lot harder. You have to kill a ton of the Emeritat enemy. These enemies are level 40, which is 5 levels higher than the max level cap for the zone that Cassie spawns in. This means that you need to be pretty careful when you're fighting them. And, like all other morbals in the game, they have the signature Bad Breath attack, which can be lethal if you're not careful, since it gives you a ton of debuffs at once, including silence. Not only that, Notorious Monsters go on cooldown after being killed, so you can't just repeatedly spawn them. Cassie has a seemingly known cooldown of 2 hours. If you miss your chance, you get to wait a while to even attempt it again. This can make it difficult for players with limited schedules. You also can't have more than 3 Notorious Monsters spawned at once within a Eureka instance. If 3 other monsters are spawned, you have to kill one of them before Cassie can spawn. It also requires the current weather to be blizzard to even spawn, which only happens every few hours. All of these things have to happen for you to even attempt the fight. Cassie itself has a lot of HP, so you're going to want a sizable group as well to kill it within the time limit. You have to do all of this just for an accessory that has less than a 1% drop rate. As you can probably imagine, there isn't a huge supply of these, especially since Eureka isn't current content. It certainly has an active player base, but I wouldn't call it popular by any means. What I find so interesting is how the player base has come together to organize groups to try and spawn Cassie, as well as the other Notorious Monsters that are like it. There are a handful of discords out there that solely exist just to ping people for windows where you can work together to spawn one. That also includes websites people use to track the spawns. This means that most of the time, you'll see lots of people joining Eureka just to try and win the earring. The same can be said for the Blitz Ring as well. If you're ever in Pagos and see in your shout chat that someone's saying invite Cassie, now you know why. Even if you don't want to use it for the haste, it sells for around 19 million gil in the market board, which is massive. Most people would never need gil again if they sold one of those. I love stuff like Eureka because it really brings people together. Eureka is unlike any other part of Final Fantasy XIV because you're almost really forced to interact with other players. It truthfully gives me the MMO feeling more than most other parts of the game. Now I know that this isn't for everybody, but I really enjoy the social interaction. Even if you don't want to talk, it's still a cool way to end up in groups and just do stuff with other people. Most of the game's content honestly feels isolating in comparison. Not much else really forces you to interact with so many people at once besides things like world fates, which are also super rare. There's a reason that this is so important to me. If you've kept up with the discourse lately around 14, a lot of people have been expressing their frustration around the lack of things to do in Endwalker. Now obviously this isn't Endwalker content, but my hope is that by finding this video, you've maybe discovered another part of the game that you can enjoy and spend time on that you otherwise wouldn't have ever checked out. A sort of goal of mine is to really enable people to have more fun in different ways. There are a lot of things in this game that are just easy to miss. Maybe someone told you that Eureka was boring, so you didn't check it out. Or perhaps you were too focused on the main story or rating. That's really how I felt. Eureka was kind of a surprise for me because it had a pretty negative reputation in the community. Because of that, I kind of stayed away from it for a while. I did end up checking it out eventually just because I wanted to see if I liked it for myself. And of course, I ended up loving it. Even if you don't like Eureka, I'm sure that there are other things out there for you to enjoy, and I plan on talking about all of them. Eureka itself has a lot more than just making money with Cassie, so I'm sure that I'll talk about it more in the future as well. If you're interested in finding out more about how to enjoy Final Fantasy XIV, subscribe for more videos like this and feel free to hang with me in my Discord. I'll see you in the next one.